And now we're live at the top of the tower with our guest today, and how do we describe multi-talented producer, a filmmaker, an actor, a philanthropist? It goes on and on. Her recent work is beautiful documentary, Posso Entrare. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
It's terrible.
Is that terrible? You say it properly.
Posso Entrare.
Posso Entrare.
An Ode to Naples.
Okay, I understand the
you
second bit.
You can say that bit.
An Ode to Naples.
Let's go again with Posso Entrare.
Posso Entrare.
Ah,
better?
Bene.
Bene, grazie, ragazza.
Prego.
Okay, well, welcome to the show.
Thank you,
And this
Ryan.
is a beautiful document. I said to you as we were coming on the air, I felt like I'd eaten a really good meal and had half a bottle of the robust red wine from your very own vineyard.
Thank you.
So it was really good. Now, I know you have a love affair with Italy. This seems to be the backdrop to this story. So tell me, why did you alight on Naples to do this beautiful study? Where was this all coming from in your heart and your soul and your brain?
Okay, well, when you say I have, I've had a long relationship with Italy, so I know a lot of Italy. Namely, I was an actress in the 80s, doing 3 movies back to back in Rome, in Cinecittà.
Yeah.
I gave birth to Elliot, who's 35, in Pisa. At that point, Sting and I decided we fell in love with Tuscany and sort of wonderful people who supported me through my childbirth and his writing of Soul Cages at that time. And then we sort of thought, Italy is a little bit, in our bones. I then, started to get invited to this wonderful little film festival called Ischia Global, and I would go to Port of Naples, get on my boat, and go off to Ischia and visit the islands, and yet I never actually visited Naples. And when I ask a lot of my friends and a lot of people, why don't you go to Naples?
Yes.
They'll give you the same answer and the same sort of tropes that I had.
Bit rough.
Dangerous, dirty.
Yeah, a bit dirty. I was describing it as the most beautiful, filthy place I've ever seen. And I say that to fulfill the tropes, but just... I've been to Ischia a couple of times. It is beautiful, just for people's heads. Think of talented Mr. Ripley. Yeah. And if the Italians holiday there, you're in the right zone. So it's a really stunning part of the world. But Naples has the most beautiful museum to the ancient Roman gods and emperors and everything, as you well know. But also these beautiful alleyways. And anyone who's seen the show Gomorrah, which I gobbled up.
You did.
Oh, did you? I mean, you must have loved it.
Yes, well, I know the movie very well, and I've seen a few of the series that Roberto Saviano,
who features in the
wrote the book, and then is one of the showrunners of the series. And the series have sold to 160 territories in the world.
And you sat down with the author of these series.
I did,
and I was struck by a few things. One, he was 27 when he wrote the book, which kind of unveils the secrets behind this internecine feuds in this part of Italy. But also, he's now 43, 4 bodyguards permanently, and death threat hanging over his head.
Yeah.
A fascinating person to meet and giving a bit of insight into the city.
He is fascinating, and the Neapolitans can be quite unkind on Roberto because he is actually quite wealthy. Has made a lot of money from the book, the movie, and the series. But he is actually a prisoner in that he cannot go to the piazza and enjoy a glass of wine. He can't go to a restaurant, sit down with his friends. That all public places are off limits. They will withdraw his 4 detectives if he were to be in public, and so he has this life of a prisoner. And in actual fact, when I spoke to him off air, he said, that he knows Salman Rushdie very well.
That came into my head.
They communicate very frequently by email, and I think when Salman got after the fatwa was lifted and he got stabbed in the eye, I think for Roberto, I think the writing was on the wall. He will never be safe.
Yeah.
And he has resigned himself to that. And on that day when I met him and he was he came to Naples at our request, the producers and my request, and we weren't able to pick just one location. There were a possibility of 4 because he can't just turn up if it's been announced where he'll be. And we sat down for half a day. Actually, his interview was the longest one that I did, and one of the most fascinating, obviously. And I felt him to be very vulnerable that day because 2 days before in Rome, he'd been to court and was told in no uncertain terms that the Camorra are out to kill you. God. There is still a target on your body.
That's no way to live, is it?
It will remain so.
God, it's desperate. Yeah. On a happier note, there's a lovely song that plays at one point in the documentary, and I took down the lyrics. There was something along the lines of the streets of Naples are stage. And there's comedy and tragedy in the scenes. Yeah. And I thought it was a lovely line to sum up.
Napoli è un palcoscenico.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, it that sums it up, this idea that people talk about people watching. And you can do that in Manhattan, and you can do that in London or Dublin, wherever you might be. But there's something about the physicality of Italians, the gesticulation, the passion, that Latin sense of...
The Neapolitans particularly, have this sense of theatre, and they're very out about their contaminazione, which means contamination. Now, they don't use it as a pejorative. It's not a negative word at all for them because of this 3,000-year history and at least 12 conquests. They're very proud of the fact that their DNA is so rich. It's the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, 400 years of Spanish rule, 200 with Spanish French. It couldn't be richer. And the legacy that was left from all that is, in its architecture, in its art, in its amazing food that they eat, to this sort of cultural richness.
Stay with us. Will you stay with us? Because we haven't even got to World War II. We haven't even got to Diego Maradona. It's Trudie. You want to hang on for a few minutes if that's okay with you?
Of course.
Trudie Styler, our guest at the top of the tower. We're talking about Posso Entrare, her documentary. Are we doing okay with the pronunciation?
Benissimo.
Grazie. And it's an ode to Naples. And so it does what it says on the tin. And one thing I noticed when I was looking at it was when I was in Naples and then watching her documentary was graffiti. I mean, even the word is Italian, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it's a natural fit, but my God, they do graffiti quite well there as well.
Very good. They're great. They are natural artists.
You obviously wanted to give a nod to those street artists along the way.
Sure.
Yeah. And then I noticed that 1 hour and 2 minutes in, there's a cameo by a singer with an old guitar. This is your husband Sting playing. But this guitar he uses has a story in itself, which I was fascinated. Tell me about this.
Yes. Well, this is a joint venture that Don Antonio, who you meet in the film, who's this parish priest who does so many great things to champion people who otherwise would be neglected and not cared for. And so the project is between two prisons, one in Secondigliano in Naples and one in Milan. And the North-South have a rivalry, as you know. So this is a sort of like a very good team-building exercise of, let's work together. And the project is for the boats that arrive in Lampedusa with its occupants being, of course, migrants, and sometimes the boats arrive without them, and those folks have sometimes drowned, and when they arrived with migrant people, they get jailed or detained. And so the boats get dismantled and they're recycled into orchestral instruments, stringed instruments, and so there's this building of an orchestra della mare, and Sting was invited to play the very first guitar that was made in this prison that I filmed in Secondigliano, made by the inmates, and I asked the governess of the prison, who's a great cool lady, would it be possible to have the men who made the guitar to be able to watch it being played? And she said yes, and so Sting put on a little bit of a concert play.
What a bittersweet story.
Playing Fragile, yes. Yeah,
you were telling me during the song that you were giving a restaurant recommendation to Bono and his wife when they were in Naples, and you were reminded of that time you met the band and at least you met Bono in when they were doing Band Aid with
Yes.
Sting in 1985. And you still have the bruises from the elbow you were getting in your rib cage. What happened? Tell people the story.
Yeah, okay, let's digress from Posso
Just for a
Entrare.
moment, yes,
For
yes.
a moment. Well, yes, 1985, here we are, 1985. I'm a new mum, and Geldof has called everybody that he knows who's a musician to come to his studio on a December afternoon, and we come. And so I get introduced to Bono, and sitting next to him, and just comes out of my mouth naturally to say, oh, and how are you doing? And he says, we're working in America, just got here. And I said, oh, and would you say that you've made it yet in America? And so Sting just like thumped me in the arm, and it's like the biggest fan there is. I've never lived it down.
But you stayed friends. Ever since. Posso Entrare, which I eventually got my head around to pronounce. It covers World War II, the architecture, domestic violence, Maradona, football, art. It just covers a multitude. It's a beautiful, beautiful program. Trudie Styler, congratulations on it. And people will be able to enjoy the fruits of your labour on Disney Plus when it drops and starts streaming this Friday.
Yes, on the 24th.
So
indeed.
that's very, very exciting. I'm sure it's more to come from there, from you. But otherwise, you're a busy lady. You've got a few grandchildren now.
I have 8 grandchildren. We have 8 grandchildren.
Yeah,
Sting and I have 8 grandchildren. Yes, it's grand. I love that.
It's a great thing. So, well, welcome back to this part of the world for now. And thank you for being with us today. What a pleasure to see you.
I've really enjoyed myself.
Grazie.
Thank you. Good prego,
Ciao,
Ryan.
ciao,
Grazie.
ciao.